Welcome to this live session hosted by Fab, your insurance broker and moving to France expert. Fab is like your immigration GP. We're here to answer all your questions: visas, residency, healthcare, driving, taxes, properties, and much more. We navigate the complexities of France to help you embrace the French lifestyle you've always imagined. Although we are experts in the immigration industry and have been working in this space since 2015, none of what we say should be considered legal or financial advice. It is also worth noting that the immigration industry is an ever-evolving field, so things that are relevant today might be outdated or inaccurate when you actually move to France. Fab's main source of revenue is insurance through our brand, Fab French Insurance. Our main goal is to ultimately help you move to France, as we only sell insurance to clients applying for a visa, a residency permit, or those with a French address. During this session, you can ask any questions you want. However, we will not answer long questions to keep the pace fast. We also won't be able to address questions related to personal or very specific issues, but rest assured, we can get in touch after this session to either advise or refer you to one of our trusted partners. And now it's time to get this event started. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find our answers valuable. Our greatest reward would be to be a part of your journey to moving to France. And hopefully, it starts with this session today. We will pause briefly to allow all registrants to join. The session will begin shortly.
Hello, everyone. So we're back and now we're live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Well, this evening, this morning, depending on where you're from. Hopefully, this would be a very interesting session. So feel free to ask the questions in the Q&A section. I'll start this session by answering some questions that we received over email prior to the event. So let's get this started. First question was from Craig, saying if visa is approved, do the normal 90-180 days Schengen zone rules still apply to travel outside of France during the 12-month visa period? So yes, under a visa, you still are bound to the 90 days rule outside of France. So obviously you can exceed that in France. But then it would change when you're under a residency permit. So, well, technically this is the case, but this is basically a bit of a gray area, as it's difficult for authorities at the no borders to know where you're from and to track that 90 days rule, because unless you're traveling in and out the Schengen area. So, but theoretically, under a visa, you're still bound to the 90 days rule. And then it becomes more flexible when you get a residency permit, a longer term permit. Okay, so next question from Christine. I've asked about second home taxes and some people have sent me to various websites, but I can't figure out exactly what they mean. If we own two homes in France, how the tax is calculated on the second home. Also, if we own a primary home in France and other property in another country, how is it taxed? So actually, the rule of thumb for taxes, and well, especially in relation to properties, is very simple. A property is always taxable and tax liable in the country it's in. So if you generate income, like rental income, Airbnb, whatever, JEETs, you need to pay the taxes in the property in the country where the property sits. Okay, so if you have a property in France, you need to pay taxes in France. Then there is taxes on the building itself, like property tax, So, well, it's exactly the same, whatever it's your main residence or a second home, okay? So the difference in France with second home is called the taxe d'habitation, which is kind of a council tax or something like that, which you don't pay on your main property and do pay on second homes in France. That's the only difference. But the property tax itself is not dependent on whatever this is a main or secondary home. Okay. And then if you generate revenue, same, it doesn't really matter. Well, there are tax implications, but let's not complexify the topic. Doesn't really matter. Whatever this is your main or second home property, you need to declare that and file that under your national taxes in France. Hope that answers the question. Another question, actually, two questions from Corbett. Do you have a French language school program to recommend? Well, not really, because it really depends on where you are in France, although there is one program that's available internationally, internationally, and well, in France, mostly, that is called the Alliance Française, that we've heard of very often. So one I would, I'd say, recommend, although we don't have ties with them. But there are tons of programs you can find online that probably could fit the profile. I would strongly recommend some immersion courses. It's better than all the online stuff, because at the end of the day, you need to speak with the natives, Bonjour au café, s'il vous plaît. This is what it boils down to eventually. Can you recommend a pet transport company from the US, California in my case, for large dogs? Well, actually, yes, there aren't that many. So there's one company we know of, and that every time we're being asked about traveling pets, whatever they hold, sick or large, or just for convenience, there is that particular company that's called K9 Jets, like literally K and then 9 and Jets. So these are charter jets to fly animals basically from the US, UK, and various countries. So I strongly recommend having a look at these guys. Question from Devin. I'm wondering if the rules and requirements for a visitor visa are the same for Canadian citizens as they are for US and EU citizens. So it's a yes and no question. Yes, they're the same, whatever you're from the US or Canada, basically on non-EU citizens. But they're not the same if you're a EU citizen, because, well, then you don't need a visa if you're a EU citizen. So you don't need a visitor visa, period. So in that regard, it does change. But for EU and non-EU citizens, that's the difference. But all non-EU citizens, or at least in theory, equal in regard to that. I'm saying in theory because also visas, at the end of the day, are very political tools. So also depending on the diplomatic relationships that your country has with France at the minute when you apply for your visa, you might experience more or less flexibility. Well, at the minute, France pretty much is friendly with pretty much all English-speaking countries, so you should be safe out there. And a question from Janet. I know now that the wealth tax has changed its focus to properties only. That helps. Okay, I'll answer this bit first. So yes, actually, it's not recent. I mean, it's been for years now. Indeed, France no longer taxes wealth, cash, let's say. Like if you have a financial portfolio, even if you're a multimillionaire, like thousands of millions or whatever, you'd get zero taxation on that. However, we do tax properties and property portfolio, whatever these are in France or abroad. Obviously, if you're a non-French citizen, like a tax resident, then you don't pay for the non-French properties. But then when you become a French tax resident, they'll consider your property portfolio. And if the portfolio exceeds 1.3 million, then you become eligible for that thing we call IFI, well, IFI, Impôt sur la fortune immobilière. It's not that important. However, it's not zero. So, and it can be as high as 1.5%, but it's when you get to more than 10 million portfolios for large, very large portfolios. So happy to give you more details if you get in touch about that. Another question that's very relevant is the taxe foncière and taxe d'habitation you paid taken into account when income tax is calculated. Also, social charges appear to be quite high. Well, I'm with you for the social charges. Yeah, but this is the thing. Social charges is something you probably won't experience in France at least not the ones you see online where they indeed are very high. Because basically, well, sorry, I didn't introduce Nani is here to answer your questions as well. She's with me. I jumped right in, forgot to introduce you to her. But basically, I'll be mentioning her here because, like, well, when I have to pay Nani's wage, if I pay her €1,000, I have to actually pay €2,000 because there is €1,000 extra of social charges. So unless you do something like that, well, you won't experience that level of social charges. There are other things that we call social charges in France, but they're not this high. Usually they're bundled into something else. Like if you get dividend income, you can either get that taxed onto your national taxes and part of your regular income, or pay something we call the flat tax, which is basically 30%, and does include the social charges as part of that. So it's a bit of a tricky and complex topic, but very often this is fair and relevant, unless you're hiring someone. This is completely different, and then indeed it becomes a bit crazy. But for national income and national tax, for the national taxes, when you're filing your tax return, yes, you may pay social charges, but definitely are not the social charges on wages, completely different. So, and to answer the question, no, the taxe d'habitation, which is property tax, let's call it. Well, taxe d'habitation is actually the one for second homeowners. If France is your country of main residence, you should no longer be paying that. But then you still pay the taxe foncière, which is the property tax, and that is not discounted from your national taxes. This is an extra tax. So basically, if you're a second home resident, you don't file a tax return, well, unless you have rental income or something, but you would pay property tax, taxe d'habitation, and that's all. If you become a main resident, considering you only have one property in France, taxe foncière, property tax, and national taxes, okay? So it's a bit confusing. Can you imagine if your brain starts melting down already, can you imagine mine? And before apero time on top of that, so no, you're getting hard on me. Okay, and so final question from before, and then I'll jump to the live questions. Kaylee was asking, how much would we require as proof of funds each year for me and my partner, we're not married, and my daughter, age 21, on long stay visitor visas? Would it be combined amount or individual amounts? It's actually a very, very interesting question. So combined, so basically, France wants you to meet France minimum wage, which at the minute is roughly 1,400 net a month. So that's what I expect you to have. If you're using, well, that's for income. If you're using funds instead of income, first, it needs to be instantly available cash, like funds, like if it's invested in real estate, for example, it's not liquid. It needs to be liquid funds. So sometimes stocks might be available if you can, cash it out within the same day, but it needs to be something instantly available. That being said, so you need the equivalent of 12-month worth of France minimum wage or 1 year minimum wage. So roughly, let's say it's roughly 17,000 per person. It's a theoretical requirement. When you apply combined as a couple, they apply quite a significant discount, like 30,000 would get the job done, even 25 most of the time if you have the property with no mortgage, for example. But let's stick with obviously you want to be on the safe side. So 2 times 1,400 net a month, 12 times 1,400 net a month would be what's required. And it can be combined, definitely. It can be sitting on one of the partner's bank account, even if the other has zero. It's completely okay for each. So for one partner to be using the other one's bank account or bank statements. Also not married is not a problem. It's just as long as you've been together for a while, which is not legally defined, but let's say more than 6 months and definitely more than 1 year, you'd be good. Then they'll be happy with that. Obviously, it's easier to prove you're together if you're married or civil partnership. But the real deal is more than 1 year together. Yeah, that's basically the idea. For your daughter of 21, or when there are other dependents, it depends. If they're still considered financial dependents on you, like you'd be filing tax returns with their name on it and stuff like this, that they're still financially dependent completely and considered as such by the authorities, then yes, they could also be using your combined savings, for example, or your income. But if they're not dependent, they'll need to apply separately, although it's all obviously completely fine for you to like transfer money to them or something like that so that they can qualify. No matter what happens, every adult, and actually everyone over 16 years old, needs to apply individually and will have to go through an in-person interview separately, although it could be one after another. It's important to know that. And again, you can use each and every one else's supporting documents. Okay. Hopefully that was good for a start. And then let's dive into the the growing long list of questions. Okay, I'll do my best. Brace yourselves. Is there a minimum mortgage of 150k euros for non-French residents? Well, I'll be brutally honest for that question. Getting a mortgage in France, even for the French natives at the minute, is a bit difficult. So I'd say unless you really have a very comfortable position, you can collateralize assets and you're looking for a large mortgage, forget about getting a mortgage in France as a foreigner for now. It's very, very difficult. So it's not impossible, and more than happy to hook you up with a mortgage broker in France and try to find solutions. But for small mortgages, that's going to be very difficult. Okay, I don't want to lie about that. So that's what we've experienced recently. So okay, George is asking, what do I need to renew my long stay visa? They gave me 1 year after I need to leave the country, but I want to move to France for more than 5 years. Okay. Well, might not be answering your question directly, but by usually what you do is you apply for a 1 year visa, and then you apply into French healthcare. So CPAM would say in French. And then eventually, before your visa expires, you don't really renew it. Renewing a visa technically means you have to go back to your home country and reapply for a visa. That's what they call renewing the visa, okay? So usually what you do, you don't renew the visa, you stay in France, and you actually apply for a residency permit, something we call the carte de séjour or carte de résident, but most of the time that would be a carte de séjour for you. Actually, I prefer to say it in English, residency permit, because there's just one word. It's easier. So yeah, that's the normal process. If yours is different, then you probably either didn't do the right things at the right time, or you might be in a particular situation which requires a bit more in-depth advice. What are the safest options to secure short-term accommodation other than Airbnb in Nice? Well, Nice is a busy area, so actually visa compliant. I'll stick to that. Visa compliant. There's only 3 things which are visa compliant for long-term visas. Sorry. The first one is obviously if you buy a property in France. So let's say you buy an apartment in Nice. Obviously, this one qualifies. The proof of ownership of a property. The second one is a 1 year long-term rental contract in France, or 3 years if it's furnished. But yeah, don't be scared by this 1 or 3 years commitment. You as tenants would not be committed for that long. Okay, you can walk away with a single month notice. It's actually the property owner that's committed, making your situation stable. From the perspective of the government, that's why they want this 1 year or 3 years commitment. Airbnb, at the end of the Airbnb, you can be kicked out and you could become homeless. That's why they don't like it. Although, I'll be fair, if you come from far away, like US mostly or Canada, Airbnb tends to qualify. Although in theory it's non-compliant. So well, they could start rejecting those tomorrow. And for example, I know that if you come from UK, it's automatically rejected. So, yeah, that's the current state. Tony is asking, I'll be working remotely from France with my US-based business. What is the best visa to obtain if I plan to eventually make France my permanent residence in retirement? Okay, well, very, very interesting question. So for that, first, it really depends if you're the director or managing director of your business, if it's yours, or if you're just a shareholder. So I'll split this in two different situations because it might be relevant for others. If you are a minority shareholder or just an employee, even if you're like C-level or the CEO or whatever, but you're not the majority shareholder, then you can move to France with a visitor visa and consider your remote working. This only works if we can consider there's a hierarchy on top of you. Like you have to answer to the board or to someone else, okay? Basically, you could be fired, technically. If you have control 100% or more than 50% of your company, then you need to get some sort of a business visa instead. They're both completely fine to get, don't get me wrong. It's just that it requires a bit of a more complex scheme. It's not the end of the world, but you do need to get through a business visa where there are different schemes that are available. One of the schemes might be you set up like a micro enterprise and then you invoice your wage as a director to the US company and you can still get dividends. And well, basically then it requires a bit more of a tax advice. But yeah, that's what I would require. So if you're minority shares, let's say a shareholder, you can go with the visitor visa and consider your remote working. And by the way, guys, everyone that's considering remote work can use that visitor visa stuff. Okay, it's compatible with this. Your employer doesn't have to set up a branch in France or pay social charges in France. You can be remote working in France. Beware though, you might be subject to something called the CSM tax. This is another topic, but it's just, I'm planting the seed and then you can have a look online for this CSM. Basically, if you're not paying, if you have an income and a wage in France, but not paying social charges, the state will want its share. It's not crazy, this tax, but it's not zero. I mean, it depends on how much you're making, obviously. But just to give you an idea, combined as a couple, if you're making 100,000 a year, you're looking at roughly, 3.5 thousand CSM tax, okay? So on top of your national taxes and other taxes. Hopefully my answer got the job done. Aaron is asking, hello, thanks for this. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for the support. I'm a baker from the UK. Great. Right. A UK baker. It's great. Well, it's not just the French then. Who is shortly heading out to France on a kind of a holiday for nearly 3 months to network and volunteer at bakeries who make pain au levain like me. Good, like this. Mike, obviously, I'm French. I like bread. So my question is, I'm more likely to be granted a sponsored by a business visa than to be applying for a visa myself. So actually sponsored, there's only, well, I'll be careful with that. Obviously, everything I'm saying, I make firm statements, but there are always exceptions, but like the vast majority of the time, that would be accurate. So like, well, there's only one way to be sponsored, and it's like some sort of a work visa. Like you find an employer and you're sponsored, and that's not a business visa, that's a work visa, like someone's hiring you. So that's a way. If you find someone willing to hire you, this is a way. And then they'll help you do the visa, or you can do it, but then they may support you. I mean, the visa itself is not that expensive, by the way. So, so it's not, it's roughly 350 euros. So, well, unless obviously you seek assistance from a third party to get the job done. But yeah, so the visa itself technically is 350 euros. But then business visas, if the ultimate goal for you is to set up shop in France, then yeah, that might be a business visa. But also, I mean, it's highly unlikely that you'd be moving to France and then set up the business and start making money, all that within 1 month. Or maybe it is, but it depends. Like if the goal is to move to France, eventually spend 6 months setting up a business, getting things done, and then you'll get the business started, maybe it's also easier to start with a visitor visa, like a non-working visa. And when you incorporate the business, then, at some point, it's at a later stage, but then you inform the authorities that you've changed your plans and then it's going to be a business. So there's more than one way to go. That's what I'm saying. So you can find a job, and that would be a way to be sponsored. Or maybe your goal is to set up a business, and then that would be a business visa. Or maybe you're just traveling, and then that's a visitor visa, and eventually you can transform this into something else. So hopefully answers the questions. Okay, Dave and Sue. Hi, can a couple apply for their visas jointly to take account of one having more income than the other? Well, yeah, definitely. It's actually, yeah, pretty much everyone does that. You can even use 100% of the partner's income, of the other partner's income, or the partner's savings, or even a mix of that. Completely okay to use each other resources. Again, as I was saying, the only real requirement for that is that the couple has been a couple for a while, which more than 1 year, that would be okay. Less than 1 year, that would be on a more than a case by case basis. What is the income tax for a UK resident and owner of a UK company? Uh, but there's none. If you're remote working, then the income, um, well, depends, but there's none as per se. So if you run a UK company, odds are very high. I'll make assumptions. Well, I have to answer this question. Um, Odds are very high that you'll have to set up a French business, and with the French brand, a branch, sorry, then you'll be paying French taxes and charges on that. So considering you're making less than 77,000 euros per annum and charging yourself, let's say like the French business is charging the UK's business less than 77,000 per annum, you probably would create a micro enterprise, and the taxation rate would be, sorry, I'm bombarding you with numbers. Hopefully I'm not losing too many people here. But the taxation rate would be 23%, but not on 100% of your turnover. There's probably going to be at least a 30% discount. So basically 23% of 70% of your turnover. And then do the math. Then I'm too tired already to do it by head. Off the top of my head. Okay, Georgie, I'm looking to move to France hopefully next year. Yeah, hopefully. Looking forward to this. It would be good to know if I start the visa process later this month. How long does it normally take if I was to work with you guys to get a visa and with regards to renting, etc. So actually, Georgie, the earlier you start, the better. The only thing I'd say, consider a date in mind. It doesn't have to be a fixed date at this point, but like if your goal is to move to France around, I don't know, March, July 2025, you're good. You're good. If the plans is like, well, later this year, like December 2025 or maybe 2026. So, well, we can be in touch. We can have a chat. I can already give you the answers of things that might be look daunting at this stage for you. I can put your mind at ease. But if you're more than 1 year away from the event, it's a bit early. If you're less than 1 year away, it's good. You are in the starting blocks, so we can definitely get the ball rolling. The ideal when we'll start rolling up our sleeves is basically 6 months ahead from the date. And then definitely when you are within what I like to call the golden zone for visa applications, which is 90 to 30 days prior to intended arrival date in France. That's where things need to be in motion. So yeah, hopefully it answers the question. Another question from Aaron. If I get a sponsored work visa, does it make it easier for my wife to get a visa also? Uh, yeah, well, for the partner, usually you apply combined. So the partner may either, depends if you're applying together or one after the other. If together, usually the partner would just apply same as you. It's just that it changes the requirement. It increases the income requirement or the savings you require, but usually you'd get the same visa done for the both of you. Also depends on what the wife would be doing. But let's say technically it doesn't really change how easier it would be. It's the same process. But depending on how much you're making and what the situation will be, it might make it easier to meet the requirements. Eric saying, is the primary home taxed less than a secondary property? Depends on what we're talking about here. If it's so, property tax has nothing to do. Actually, when you're taking over a property, like you intend to buy a property, it's okay to ask the seller how much property tax are you paying, because you'd be paying exactly the same tax. So it has nothing to do whatever is a main or second home property. But it is correct that you'd pay less taxes on the main home because you won't have to pay the taxe d'habitation. Whereas you'd have to pay that on second homes. So in that regard, yes, we could say primary home is taxed less, but just because there is one less, there's one tax that doesn't apply on primary homes. Is it possible to work remotely for a US company while living in France in the long term? Yes, it completely. I know you've had mixed opinions because, some people want your business to set up a branch in France or want you to pay social charges. No, you can definitely work. There are some limits, obviously, there always are. There are some limits. As long as you do not work for French clients, even if your business has a French branch, it's okay. But the goal is it needs to be clear. Well, if it has a French branch, it needs to be clear that it has to make sense that you're not affiliated to the French branch. Yeah, we can talk about that more in depth on a private conversation. But basically, the idea here is that if you're not working for French companies, meaning like you don't have French clients, or you're not working for French clients, like, individuals, like selling your products to the French, that would be fine. Yeah. Last question from Aaron. If we bought a home, Aaron, you said it. It's the last question. The audience will make sure you stick to that. If we bought a home in France, does it make it easier to get a non-sponsored visa? Well, no, it's a question we get asked often. Like, does it make it easier to get a visa if I have a French property or if I'm buying a French property? Well, it does make it easier because then you can meet the proof of income. Oh, sorry, to get a visa in France boils down to three main pillars: proof of income, proof of address, proof of medical insurance. Proof of address, if you have a property, it makes this pillar easier to meet. But the fact that you have a property doesn't really make the process any easier or harder. It's just that, if I'm being honest, I've pretty much almost never seen a visa being rejected for French property owners. Like for those who would have invested into a French property and then eventually ask for a visa, I've pretty much never seen a visa being denied. So technically speaking, it doesn't make a difference. Like legally speaking, it doesn't make it easier. But in real life, it kind of does. But it's more like they'll probably be a bit more flexible because you would have invested. But yeah, I think it answers the question. Richard's asking, for the beginner who intends to move permanently to France from the UK, what are the first steps once I'm in France? For example, visa, national insurance number, medical insurance, tax domicile. Okay. The first step. So, well, let's forget you applied for the visa. You've been through the interview, and congratulations, you got your visa. You have a new page in your passport heading to France. Please don't come with a saber between your teeth and with an eye patch and something. Like, we might confuse you with a corsair or something like that. But no, okay, now you're in France. First thing you need to do is to activate your visa. Well, usually it's the first thing to do. Once the visa has been activated, you can also start the driver license exchange. Depends on where you're from, but especially if you're from the US, you want to get that started, or Canada or Australia, you want to get that started ASAP. So usually that would be that driver license exchange. You'd probably be provided with a medical interview, by the way, after you've activated your visa. For those who might have seen that, this is not a test. You can't fail this. It's more like, well, it's all for free first, and they'll even do like a scan of a chest scan to see an X-ray, to see like you don't have consumption or stuff like this. And even if you do, again, yeah, you'll just be put on quarantine, but they won't kick you out. It's just to make sure you're in good shape. And even if you're not, then to advise on the steps and how to get into the French system and stuff like this. I've lobbied very high for this medical exam to include a blood sample so that they can test for your wine intake, see if you do support the French economy. But so far, I've been rejected with my proposal. So, well, no, you're good. Yeah, you're safe for now. But I'll be lobbying. I'll keep on lobbying. Okay, but that being said, the next step, you have to wait 90 days afterwards. And after you've been in France for 90 days, you can, most of the time, apply into the French healthcare system. For those of you who would have applied, either have a job in France or would have incorporated a business in France, you don't have to wait 90 days. That would be faster. But considering the retirees or non-workers in France or remote jobs, then you can apply after 90 days to get into French healthcare, which is a very lengthy process, by the way, like 6, 8 months, depends, but a bit of, so you also want to get that started as early as you can. Tax code creation, if you bought a property, you already have it. But same, the earlier you can get it done, I would advise, as the original month are a bit busy, towards like the 6th month or so, but there's no time frame particularly for that. Worst case scenario, obviously, when you need to file your tax returns, but I mean, the earlier you can do it, the better, but there's no particular golden time where it's best to get it done. What I call the tax code is something called the NIF, Numéro d'identification fiscale, which is something you'll need eventually to file your tax return in France or to pay property taxes. And that's pretty much it for the first year. Again, for the average, Joe. And then towards the usually month 10 or 11th, I would strongly suggest, once you wait until you get your French social security numbers, once you got those, then you apply for the residency permit in France. Make sure you don't wait for too long, though. I mean, if you're getting towards, close to 30 days prior to your visa expiry, that's getting too close. So you want to get that started. So then you apply for that in France, your residency permit at your local prefecture, which is a process that shouldn't take more than 30 days anyway. And if it does exceed that, again, legally it shouldn't, but then the prefecture will extend your visa, don't worry. But yeah, that's pretty much the time frame. Okay, we are US citizen, but Costa Rican resident, and we are considering moving to France for our children to attend school in France. We work remotely for a company which functions in the US. We live in France beyond 180. Okay. Yeah, no, same. Yeah, you can be remote working. That's completely okay. Are we required to pay taxes for our income from a US company? Yes. The short answer is yes, although it's probably already been paid in the US. So you'll have a tax credit in the US or a tax refund. And then, because also very important, most countries, US, UK, Australia, all these countries, France and these countries have dual taxation agreements, actually like non-dual taxation agreements. So worst case scenario, you pay twice, and then you'll get a tax refund. Or there's also a possibility to file things a particular way so that you're not paying twice. But basically, you only pay in one country. The same source of income cannot be taxed twice, okay? So, and usually you're being taxed, again, there are exemptions like, pensions, for example, usually remains taxable. State pensions remain taxable in the country of origin. There are tons of exemption. But for wages, it's usually taxable in France if you're a French resident. Okay, regarding the 90-day visit rule in France, what happens if we have to stay an extra 2-3 days due to change in our schedule? First, you risk a fine, especially these days, they're introducing something called the ETIAS, exactly the same system as the ESTA in the US, but for the European Union, so the Schengen zone. It's going live on the 1st of January 2025 with a grace period of 6 months, but basically it's going to be live. And behind the curtains, behind the ETIAS system, we have something called the EES, entry-exit system. Basically, they'll track your in and outs. If you exceed for just 1 day, first you're up for a fine. Secondly, it jeopardizes heavily any subsequent application for visas and residency permit. They will not like this. So unless there is a strong problem and then you need to document this and it needs to be a real emergency, I would strongly discourage you from doing that, because it might things more complex later on. If it's just for vacation, you don't intend to remain permanently, worst case, you risk a fine. But yeah, I would not suggest doing that, I'd say purposefully at least. Okay, variety of visa is a little confusing. We're planning to move to France in retirement. What visa do we get? First, planning to apply for a carte de séjour eventually, etc. Well, very easy. The retirement visa for retirees, if you don't intend to work in France, or even if you do intend to run a small rental activity, but it doesn't exceed a certain threshold, which is pretty generous, it's like 23,000. You can use the visitor visa, and that's good as well. So it's probably the one you're looking for. VLSTS, visitor visa, are the keywords you should remember in that probably in that situation. George's asking, if I stay more than 6 months in France, do I need a driver license to drive in France? Actually, if you become a French resident, you need to have a license in your country of residency. So let's say you come from the US, you are in Texas, and you move to California. Once you've exceeded 90 days in California and you know the Californian resident, you should call the DMV to get the license exchange. Same for France, okay? So it's not 6 months, it's 90 days. After 90 days, you're supposed to have started the driver license exchange. There are exemptions and tolerances and, but the theoretical rule is this one. Keith is asking, do you have to convert your UK license for a French one? Actually, this one, theoretically, yes, same rule. After 90 days, you should get the process started. But as there is like a post-Brexit agreement, even with law enforcement, I'm seeing a lot of tolerance with these ones. I'm not saying don't do it, but if you don't do it, you don't risk much. With the UK license, guys, with the UK license, any other license, the tolerance is not as important. But UK license, it's a bit safer because unless you got the test after Brexit, it's recognized as if it's a European license. So it's same as me. If I'm moving to Spain, they require me to change a license. But if I don't do it, it's a EU license. So no one will come knocking at the door. Well, at least theoretically, or I hope so. But no, yeah, well, basically you get your answer. Yeah, you're supposed to, but if you don't, that's safe. So eventually get done. Well, I wouldn't say that's safe. Sorry, it's not legal in theory, but you won't get in jail for that. Is the minimum income requirement for a retired couple literally twice the minimum requirement for an individual, roughly 42,000 gross? No, it's much cheaper than that. Actually, let me grab the calculator because I don't trust my brain with this, and I'll run the exact numbers. Price yourself, guys. So the exact requirement is at the minute 16,776 euros per person. So 2 times that would be 33,500 roughly. This one I've run it up. So much lower ballpark figure than the one you just gave me. But actually, as I was saying, then it really depends. If you have a property in France, no mortgage, for example, I've seen applications with under 25,000 in savings being accepted. Okay, so the theoretical requirement is always the one you should be aiming for. But unless you're very far and disconnected from this, it should be fine. Well, obviously, if you have 10,000, that would be way too short. But okay, if you're getting closer to 25,000 as a couple, and they can see you basically they're trying to assess, would you be able to make a living in France? Okay, so if you have 20,000 and you're a couple and you're going to Paris, they know it's going to be a problem. So that might be a problem. If you're going to La Creuse, where it's one of the cheapest area in France, they may even be accepted if you're very, very far from the requirements. So, but try to aim for the requirements. Obviously, that's my advice. To get a visa to stay in France, I need to show that I have health insurance for the entire time of the stay, but after, to obtain a carte vitale, is it possible for me to change to top up? Yeah, well, actually, that's usually what we do. Indeed, you need private medical insurance. And I would actually say it's probably the best incentive because top-up health insurance, what we would call the mutuelle in France, which technically is private medical insurance as well, but it's completely different. It's much cheaper, much more convenient, no medical questionnaire, no exclusions, no excess, no deductible, nothing like that. And most importantly, the claims basically are dictated by the states, like it's the state to say that something should be refunded or not. So that changes the rules massively. They are 2 to 3 times cheaper than private medical insurance. And again, 2 to 3 times cheaper compared to the cheapest policies, private medical insurance. So yes, usually the goal is to get the private medical insurance for the first year, rush into healthcare system, so CPAM, French Social Security, which is healthcare in France, and then switch or move to a top-up health insurance. Yes, definitely. Mary's asking about Australian and Irish citizenship. All my social contributions are be paid to Australia. I have private Australian pension. Australia and France have dual taxation treaty, but not social security one. How can I buy into French healthcare? Also, I'm a pensionable age. Would I get, if I would like to get a job, if I get one, Will this allow me to access the French health and welfare system? Okay, so yes, if you're an unemployed person, yes, you'd get instant access into French healthcare. But that definitely changes the visa. So to apply for a work visa, you need to have secured the job beforehand, which is usually a bit complex. So I would rather suggest you apply for a visitor visa, non-working retiree visa. Then, same as everyone else, you wait for 90 days, then you apply into French healthcare. By the way, as long as you don't have a French social security number, so you don't have French healthcare, it's a bit complex to get a job in France. I won't lie. Well, if you're applying for a job where there's a job shortage, labor shortage, like waitress or waiters or people like that, might be that they'll want to go the extra miles to hire you. But unless you're in a situation like this, without the French social security number, it's much harder to get a job. So that being said, yeah, then you can apply through the regular road. You apply into French healthcare with a visitor visa, or if you have a job, then you're going straight into French healthcare, because then your employer would be paying social charges. Okay, Chelsea. My American parents are nearing retirement age, and they're interested in living in France during their retirement. Is there a visa for retirees? Yes, the one I mentioned, the visa. It's actually the most popular and the visa which has the highest acceptance rate, especially for retirees. Yeah. If I have Irish citizenship, does this help me getting a French mortgage? No. Sorry. Gaina was saying, please, could you talk us through the healthcare system? We have medical insurance here, but what would we expect to pay for a GP hospital treatment? Should we need it? Sorry, hospital, I don't know what this is. So yeah, well, French healthcare in general, sorry, might not be the answer you're looking for, but French healthcare in general is very cheap. Like a consultation with the GP, for example, 25 euros, like without medical insurance, without social security. So consultation with a heart doctor would be 50 euros. An ECG would be less than 100 euros. If you need to go through a scan or an X-ray, same would be less than 100 euros. A daily cost of an hospitalization is 500 euros. So a day at the hospital is 500 euros, like 515 exactly. So, well, just a ballpark figures, but so you can understand, how cheap this is compared to other countries, at least. So, but when you have social security in France, it's a very complex system. I mean, honestly, most of the French, even in the 40s or 50s, they don't get it. They don't understand the system. They just know it works. And that's usually what happens. Like once you've been around, you know that hospital tests, scans, labs, consultations, they're pretty much free of charge if you have social security and top up, which, well, by the way, all the French would have top up of insurance. So yeah, when you have those two combined, it's pretty much all for free. And then obviously you can go private or public. When you go, sometimes you may want to go to the eye-end specialist or, the posh dentist or whatever. Then you may expect some out-of-pocket expenses. But the general idea in France is that you always have an option free of charge, even for dentistry, glasses and stuff, which, by the way, when I say for dentistry, glasses and stuff, yeah, obviously if you buy a pair of spectacles and you go for the Gucci frames, Gucci, it sounds Italian, guys. No, you just don't do that. You buy Dior, and because you're French now. But yeah, no, joke apart, joke aside. Yeah, obviously, if you buy into fancy or posh stuff or the fancy brands, yeah, you'd get some out of pocket expense. Otherwise, you'd have an option for free, and that's the general idea. Okay, you always get an option for free. So hopefully it answers the question. Sorry, it's been a bit of a long one. If you're British, currently living in the UK, but have Polish passport, yeah, well, basically, if you have a European passport, no matter the passport, then you can skip the visa and even the residency permit altogether. Technically speaking, you still need medical insurance unless you're eligible to something called the S1 program, which you're eligible to if you've paid into a French social security, a European social security scheme. But as no one is checking, that's why, well, you can slip through the cracks, but I would strongly recommend you still get private medical insurance, but then you can apply for healthcare through your European citizenship instead of a non-EU citizen. which make you also probably CSM tax exempt as well. Probably because there are obviously all tons of situations, but yeah. So hopefully that answers the question. Hello, I heard that as an American, when I sell my apart in France for a price over 150K, I will need a local French fiscal specialist. It's probably a tax specialist to advise you that. No, well, you do need to file capital gains if you've sold the property in France and have made well, capital gains. But well, I would say it's not a legal requirement. It's just, France being France, paperwork confusing and stuff. Yeah, it's probably strongly recommended so that you work with a specialist. I know I'd do that, but you can do it on your own. It's not a legal requirement. It is a legal requirement to go through a notary for property transactions, but there's no way around that anyway. So, no. You can do it on your own. Although I'd advise you don't. Christine's asking, my partner lives with me in England. How do we apply for a certificate of civil partnership to apply for a visa inactive in France? So as I was saying, you don't need that. Well, legally speaking, you don't. Actually, if anything, you can apply as partners in the UK for a visa, let's say a visitor visa, if you're inactive, so non-working, and then move to France. And when in France, you can get that civil partnership, which we call the PAX. You can get it done in France. It's a walk in the park. It's done within a week usually. So yeah, that's what I would do. There are other ways again. Rod's asking, what studies do I need to have to purchase, register, and insure a vehicle in France? Well, really, Rod, it depends on where you're coming from. Legally speaking, first you need to be a French resident or have French residency. If you are, well, if you have a second home in France, it changes things massively. So considering you are moving to France permanently or you're in France permanently, well, then you move to France, you buy your vehicle. You can even buy the vehicle before you move to France. Not too early, ideally, because again, you might get, it depends on if you have a US passport, a driver license, a UK, but there are many, many different situations. So on average, I'd say you can buy it a bit beforehand, not too early. But then once you're a French resident, it's not a problem. Then you can purchase, register, and insure the vehicle. Well, you need to convert insurance history and maybe your driver license. But these are things that you can buy the vehicle first and then get things later. By the way, it's not a question I've seen, but if you want to import vehicles, we also, for example, have solutions where we can insure your vehicle on, let's say, British plates, for example, waiting for the vehicle to be imported. And then obviously, once you get the French plates, then we'll amend the policy. Well, basically, we have solutions. That's the good thing with us and the joke I like to make. Hopefully, you'll call me your immigration GP eventually. That's what I like to be called. You can ask me the questions. We've seen so many different situations that we often have an answer for pretty much whatever you're considering. Or if we don't, we know the specialist would get it done. So basically, we can write the prescriptions. If I want to have income from a gîte on my property in France, do you need a business visa? No, same. Depends on how much income you're considering, but as long as the you don't exceed 23,000 euros per annum, the government still considers this a hobby. So it's okay for you to go with a visitor visa, like a non-working visa. Most of the time. Again, there are exemptions, but I'm going with the general case. How much is the mutual health cover? So the top-up contribution once you gain access to the system. Well, it really depends on your age. I'll take an example. If you're late 50s, private medical insurance to get your visa probably going to cost around 2,000 euros each. And a top-up health insurance, so the mutual for the same age band, would rather be around 700-800,000. Sorry, 700-800, not thousand, just period. And you can pay a monthly installment. Actually, all the French would pay a monthly installment. So let's say probably 60-70 euros a month. Yeah. Again, just considering like late 50s. Okay, Shaya, sorry, it's a bit of a too long question. Rachel, if we're moving to France, buying a property to renovate and then starting a holiday let business, what visa is best? Same answer. If you're making less than 23,000, you can go with a non-working visitor visa. If you do, if you intend to exceed that, then you'll need to be registered either as a micro-entreprise or as an individual or an entreprise individual. There's tons of different schemes, but yeah, that's the idea. Mariam, how do I reactivate my health coverage in France after returning for so many years abroad? I know my social security number, etc. Okay, that's the program we call Welcome Back. So you can get in touch with us. Usually it means you need to be privately insured because it do take a while. I mean, it's actually the same as if you were not French initially. Like you need, well, it depends. If you've secured a job, it depends. If you get a job, that would be instantly. If you set up a business, there are options. But considering you're coming back for retirement, then you'll need to wait for a few, for 90 days, and then you can reactivate your rights. So get in touch with the team. This is something we do very often. Actually, Nani probably can get in touch with you. This is something we used to be dealing with. Michelle, if you're working remotely for a company in the US, have a long stay visa in France, what's the income tax liability? I know you're still required as a US citizen to file income tax. Yes. But yeah, the same as I answered before, it should be taxed in France. Should be. Well, by the way, you can get in touch with us. We have various partnerships, but there's something I have in mind. There's a tax lawyer we work with very often. They charge 300 euros for the tax consultation. So feel free to reach out and we'll share these details with you if you like. We own a property together in France, second homeowners. We're not married. Please, can you confirm the issue with tax if one of us dies? Oh, yeah, well, this is not an issue with tax. Well, as per se, well, it is because inheritance taxes will be over the roof. But there are ways around that. Like you could create something like an SCI. There are ways around that. Actually, in a situation like this, I would strongly suggest speaking with the tax advisor because there's a way to protect the surviving spouse or partner, but it needs to be anticipated. If you don't, well, you didn't. What is the process with you to obtain house insurance, car insurance, or would it be best to? Okay, well, I'll leave Nani to answer you. Nani deals with all those, so you're in safe hand with Nani. Um, uh, and for those who would be a bit racist toward the Americans, because I know with the name you got it that Nani is of American origin. So we also work with we also have a British girl. So while joking, obviously no one, obviously you're not, you don't mind. And Nani is more French than English now, if we're being honest. She's been living for like I think 25 years in France. So hopefully, Nani, you won't correct me. Keith is saying, under a 1-year visa, can you buy and renovate other properties? And also, if I want to rent, okay. Well, again, as I was saying, as long as rental income doesn't exceed a certain amount, you're good. Renovate other properties. Well, depends. If you're just buying them, that yields, yes. Well, basically, as long as you're not charging for your services, the answer is yes. If you're charging for your services, it becomes a business, and then you need to be registered as such. Self-employed, by the way, doesn't exist in France. You need to be something like a self-employed that we call the micro-entreprise, which is sitting in between being self-employed and an LLC or LTD, depending on where you're from. So it's registered as an LLC or LTD, that's the micro-entreprise, but it's as simple as being self-employed. It's just based on declarative statements, the turnover you're making, and you don't deduct expenses, and there's a flat rate taxation and stuff, so it's super simple, but you need to be registered in a way. So yeah. Okay. Richard is asking, for the VLSTS renewable visa, do you have to prove income every time you renew it? Yes, you do. And actually, usually the process is that they'll keep on checking for the 3 requirements I've mentioned, So again, proof of income, proof of medical coverage, and proof of address. So you need to have a permanent address, income in France, so that meets the requirement, or savings, or a mix of both, and medical coverage. Privately for the first year, usually second year onwards, you'd be part of the French system, so then you just need to top it up. But yeah, that's it. And then yes, that's annually. So 1-year visa, then 1-year residency permit. So 1-year visa, 1-year residency permit. then it becomes a bit of a discretionary process. So on average, they want to see you again like 2 or 3 times. So they'll renew the residency permit 2 or 3 times. But again, that could be like just one time. You know, they have discretionary powers. They want to assess how stable your situation is in France. Okay. So, well, after 3 or 5 years, then usually they give you a 5 years permit. So that's 10 total. And then you get the permanent permit, which is a 10 years one. Okay. But to be taken with a pinch of salt, if after 3 years they want to give you the 10 years permit, they can do that. I'm just giving you what's the usual process as of today. I own a property in France. My son and his family are French citizens. Okay, I'm mindful of the time. Considering the number of questions, I'll be going for an extra half hour. For those of you who don't have the patience, you can watch the replay, or I'll also send a follow-up email to everyone that has registered. Don't worry. Just watch out for this, and I also offer one-on-one consultations to all of the registrants. So thank you for being with us. I'll continue to deep dive into the questions, but just saying for those who may have only scheduled 1 hour for this. I own a property in France. My son and his family are French citizens. Can I receive a long stay visa more easily than going through? Not really, no. As I was saying, yeah, would make the rules a bit more flexible, but same process. Well, you do have a particular visa, which is like it's actually not a visa; it's a residency permit, parent of a French citizen, but actually makes it more complex. So I would rather go through the visa process. We are in Aude, okay, which is the French department. Nice. And looking for a house. At what stage in the buying process can we give a house as our address? Well, unfortunately, the very last end of the process. Basically, you need to get your hands on a document called the Acte de Vente Authentique, which is a proof of ownership, which you only get once you've finalized the sale, usually after 90 days. So usually you put down an offer and 90 days later, you get the Acte de Vente Authentique. Could be much faster, but on average, you're looking at 2 to 3 months, and more like 3 months plus or minus a couple of weeks. Is there a tax-free allowance for individuals? Yeah, well, same as most countries on the planet, you know, that it goes by income bands, you know, and ranges. So like the first slice, which is basically 13,000 per person, is tax-free. And then there is like I don't know that in my heart, but you know, it's like then there are by ranges. So yeah, kind of is, yeah. If you're a French resident and have two step-children through husband, okay, are there any rules to leaving the property to them? Okay, you're French resident, they both live in the UK. Well, depends if you're married, a civil partnership, and also depends on the scheme. Same, if you anticipate, yes, there are solutions to favorize one particular child or some childs. France cannot disinherit. If you have a child of your own, for example, it's not possible to give him nothing and get all of your assets to someone else. But there's a way to favorize some of your heirs, even if they're not direct heirs. So there's a way, but same, it needs to be anticipated, and you need to come up with some schemes before something could happen, you know, so that obviously before you pass away, which hopefully with through wine intake would be in decades, like decades towards like 5-6 decades, something. Yeah, it makes us immortal, doesn't it? Okay, Kate's asking if I sell my US home after I move to France and I'm a French tax resident, or yeah, I don't have to pay French tax on gains. Well, yeah, you have to pay capital gains on, same for the UK, US, France, the same regulation. You have to pay capital gains on second homes. So if you're making capital gains on the property and that's no longer your main property, in theory, you do have to pay capital gains on that property. So where you live doesn't matter, actually. I got a carte de séjour before Brexit. Okay, that means you have probably a 10 years withdrawal agreement, residency permit. That's great. WAP, a WAP permit. We're in Star Trek, guys. I have a house in the UK and in France, but the agreement was agreed with me being on the UK pension and tax in the UK. Can I make France my primary residence without paying taxes to France and keep paying the UK? Okay, well, for state pensions, as I was saying, odds are high that it can remain tax liable in the UK. I don't know all the kind of scheme by heart, off the top of my head, especially with all, internationally, there's so many. So I strongly suggest a consultation with the tax lawyer. So I can't answer yes. Uh, it's possible, but it needs to be double checked. This one would be a firm answer. It's not something you can opt in or opt out for. It's either you qualify or you don't. It's a rule. So yeah, needs to talk with an expert for that. I want to move my business to France. I'm a hairdresser. I own a house there. I'm married, but my spouse is retired with two pensions. Yeah, so actually the spouse can apply for a visitor visa. You can also apply for different visas, by the way, it's completely okay. So the partner could apply for a visitor visa, and then you on the other end can apply for an entrepreneur visa, indeed. That's probably, or some sort of a business visa, because it might also be a profession libérale visa. There are other types, I prefer to say business visa. It encompasses all of those. And as you're already doing that, it's you can basically use your data from your current activity and say, yeah, well, I think I'd be making probably in the same ballpark figure, but then you can use your spouse income as well. And basically, it's safe. I mean, aim as low as you can. Like even if you're making 20K at the minute, say maybe if you just need 5K or even lower because your husband's revenue potentially and income and savings, sorry, qualify for you both already, then just use that, and say, well, okay, I'd be making 5,000, that's fine, or 2,000, because don't oversell the fine. If you already qualify through the husband or the partner, it's okay to use someone else's situation, even if you're like, yeah, but that doesn't sound like a lot. If I say I'll be making 1,000 or 2,000, yeah, but if you qualify through someone else's, yes, it does actually. So, um, okay, can you elaborate on taxes paid by French resident on funds, cash, retirement? Okay, well, so we don't tax cash in France, at least not at the minute. Again, that may change, but um, France only considers and taxes things that are supposed to be taxed in France. So, uh, and also it's only taxable if you draw the money down onto your bank account. Okay. If the money doesn't hand on your bank account, let's say you have, well, obviously, well, this is obvious, but I'll say the obvious. You have a business, the business is making money, but you're not drawing down from the business onto your bank account. You're not tax liable for that money that you're making there. Um, there is a French specific investment scheme that's called the assurance vie, it's life insurance, but obviously it's French. We had to make it confusing, the name. So it's actually a saving plan. It's not life insurance, but so you can invest into that. And if you're making profits or dividends, you have other sources of income because then you can buy stocks and stuff through that medium. Every profits you're making would have zero tax liability. Even if you've made in the thousands of thousands or the hundreds of thousands, unless you draw down from that saving accounts. So we only tax money you draw down. So that's why it's difficult for me to elaborate on taxes because it's so specific and it really goes all over the board that it needs to be specific to your situation. Sorry, but and that's why I'm saying, well, I'd strongly suggest a consultation with a tax lawyer, 300 euros, and you're all set. That's basically what it would cost you to have peace of mind and know exactly where you're going to or into. I do not have to worry about driving license reciprocity since I have a French license. Wow, congratulations. Unfortunately, California is not in the treaty like Florida, which would have that reciprocity. I do not have to worry about, okay, so I don't see the sorry, I don't understand the question. Yeah, well, if you have a French driver license, then you're good. Yes, you don't need anything. But if you have California or Florida license, yeah, those cannot be exchanged. And by the way, if you're from a state, for example, in the US that doesn't have agreements, what I would do is if you have friends, family acquaintances in another state that does have agreements, try to relocate before you move to France, which then would not be a problem. You relocate to that other site, and then obviously 90 days later, you inform the DNV and then get the license from this site, which will become exchangeable in France much more easily. That's a trick that a lot of pulling when coming to France. So, doesn't really answer the question. Sorry if I didn't get this right. Exploratory visit outside of France, EU. What are the safest options to secure short-term accommodation? Don't understand the question. Sorry. Mariam, what is the process for transferring funds from a foreign bank account to my French bank account? I've heard that many French people use services like Wise or FX. Well, obviously, it depends if it's in a foreign, if it's sitting in a foreign currency or not. Yes, if you're using, well, it also depends on how much money we're talking about. My advice, like 50,000 or more, I would strongly suggest using the services of a dedicated currency broker. 10 to 50,000, probably okay to use Wise and the like online banks. And less than that, you don't even have to worry. You can just transfer from your current bank account to another one, So yeah. And if it's already in euros, you don't even have the problem. Yeah. Okay. Employment tax. If I hire household cleaners, I'm supposed to pay something for them. Yeah. But that would be very reasonable. And also you'd have a tax incentive for that. So make sure you use something called the CESU, CESU, chèque emploi service. There are even, cleaning companies which will offer their services as a company, and they'll take care of all of that for you. Just make sure when you hire someone that they are CESU compatible. That's usually the best. So this way you don't have to deal with pretty much anything. They take care of that. You'd have a lower taxation rate, but most importantly, you can discount 50% of that from your national taxes. So it's as if you're only paying half of the social charges, basically. So, well, quite good. That's what I'm doing. So, bonjour, for EU citizens, I want to reside in France. Do we need to register somehow? Well, no, apart from the taxman, which, has, only two things are certain in life, death and taxes. So yeah, apart from the latter, nothing else you really need to take care of. Okay. So to fast track a bit, I'll try to focus on the short questions. Is US Social Security taxed as income in France? No, it's seen as pension, so it's tax liable in the US only, and not in France. However, it needs to be declared in France because it counts towards household income. And if you have other sources of income, it will increase the total household income and potentially your tax bracket. But yeah, small mortgages, what is considered small. You probably don't want this. Under 250, this is really small, 250,000. But really, like if you're under 500,000 and you're a foreigner, they probably won't even look into the file. So yeah, sorry. I have some shotguns. Okay, what do I need to do to bring them to France? Might be a problem with transportation, but for France, you just need to have a legal license to carry. So that means you need to be part of a shooting range. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, don't know the word for that in English, but you probably got it. Or have a hunter license in France. So it's an either or, and obviously you need to register those with the gendarmerie. But the prerequisite, you cannot bring over some guns into France if you're not a member of a shooting range or have a hunter license in France. Yeah. So that's the prerequisite. And then you need to pre-declare that you're bringing the guns again with the gendarmerie. But the prerequisite is to be part of a shooting range or a hunter. When we arrive in France, do we need to Do we need a return ticket to prove we will not stay? No, no. Well, when we arrive, though we intend to apply for residency. Not sure I get the question. Well, if you apply for a visa, you don't need a return ticket if it's a long-term visa, I want 12 plus month. And if you come to France straight away and intend to apply for residency without a visa, that's not possible unless you're the spouse of a EU citizen or a partner of a EU citizen. Or there are some exemptions, but this is not possible to apply for residency straight away. So it's either you're a tourist and then, yes, you need a return ticket, or you intend to stay permanently, but then you would have a visa. So hopefully it answers the question. When applying for long stay visa, can our address be in a motorhome, or it needs to be a permanent address? So this is something we see sometimes. It's just if you're using something like that, it might be seen as a non-permanent address. So it becomes discretionary. The consulate will either accept or deny this, but I cannot answer this for certain. So sorry, it's not a definitive answer, but we're retired. When we move to France, we plan to purchase an apartment. Would we have the choice between cashing out or take a mortgage? Would we even be considered for sorry, it's a bit too not sure I understand. I would need a bit more time to assess this question. Sorry, I won't answer this one. Question involves shipping household goods and vehicles to France from the US. Household goods are fairly straightforward, but I'm lost on what fees in France would be for shipped a vehicle. Well, we do have a service for that. Just reach out. We can help you import a vehicle, re-register the vehicle. We can basically get it done for you. So, well, it's just that if you get in touch, we'll tell you exactly how much it would cost you, potentially even including transport. So, if we are a retired couple living in France, would we have to pay social charges? No. Well, again, as I was saying, it's a bit of a weird word. If you're getting dividend income and apply for the flat rate tax, the 30% tax, then technically there is the social charge. Oh, sorry. Bless me, I suppose. So you'd need to pay technically you'd have social charges into that flat tax. But yeah, no, you won't have to experience this as, again, as the crazy social charges on wages I've mentioned. Is it possible to find a one-bedroom apartment to rent in Paris for 1,500? Yeah, it is. 1,500 euros a month. One bedroom, yeah, that's doable. It's a bit on the lower end, but if like a studio or something like that, yeah, that would be doable. Post Olympics might even be the right time to consider that. But we also work with guys who could help you find a property or properties in France and especially in Paris. So reach out and I'll be happy to share some details. What is the process for engaging a guarantor? You can't really, it doesn't exist in France. So you can't. It's either you can do it on your own, or I mean, it does, but as an expat, that would be very difficult at first. So safe to say, it's not as straightforward as US or UK. So let's consider it's not a real thing here. So I'm purchasing a house in France with cash, but don't intend to stay there for more than 3 months HT. No, you don't need a visa then. Yeah. Well, I'd recommend you buy private health insurance for the sake of being covered when you move in France, when you're in France, but you don't need a visa. If you don't exceed the 90 days allowance every 180 days, then you're good. Can you use my daughter's address for long-term visa application? What is the yeah? If your daughter can have you around, yeah, definitely, yeah. If a person is received Social Security but has an online business, what is the tax process of insurance? Again, as I was saying, with businesses, depend on the scheme, depends if you're the director or not. Yeah, I'd need to know more. It's probably involves you having to set up a business in France and then go through a business visa. But I'm making a lot of assumptions here. Danny, is my wife has European passport and I'm a business owner, sole shareholder when I need a business visa? Yes. Oh, sorry. As a European passport? No. Well, no. then sorry, it's getting late, I suppose. No. If you're the partner of a EU citizen, then you can apply. You can actually move to France without a visa and apply straight for a residency permit from France. You need to get it done within the first 90 days, though. It's very important. But you can come to France without a visa. Yeah. I'm currently okay. I've worked in the UK for 35 years under indefinite leave to remain. Okay, but I've only an Australian passport. I'm retired. Would I be considered for us a stay visa on a small pension? Do we have any options? Okay. Well, as I was saying, the income requirement, you have to meet the requirement. So if you can't meet the requirement, unfortunately, that won't be possible. That being said, you can apply if you're Australian living in the UK, you can apply for either the country of residence or the country of nationality. So you can apply from either Australia or UK in your case. Danny, my business would remain in the UK. Well, sorry, Danny, I don't follow up on the question, so I can answer this one. I don't remember what was the initial one. Too many questions. Does one need a work visa in order to practice their art and on occasion to sell their wares? Okay, so this one's a bit particular because then you'd rather be an artist, so it's not a work visa. And as an artist, well, that might be a passeport talent, that might be a business visa. These particular case would require more in-depth consultation. Actually, for this, I would also I could hook you up with a French consul we work with, who may actually have the answers to this. Would be able to better guide you. Yeah. Okay. Could you review the dog types? One, two. Oh yeah. Well, basically, category one are what is considered attack dogs in France and are heavily regulated. And pretty much all the other categories are dogs that are safe to have without license. But then with their category one type of dogs, well, then just type in category one dog France, and then you'll see the list of breeds that are considered as such. You do need to declare that with the mairie and have an authorization to have that kind of dog. So I think it answers the question. If you participate in the financial independence program, or you're not, I don't know what this is. Sorry. So that's yeah. You said it's currently nearly impossible for a foreigner to, what I meant is okay. I've answered this one already. Okay, too long question. I don't remember if you mentioned an approximate income requirement for a married couple. Yeah. So well, roughly 30,000 euros combined per annum. Okay. Like theoretically it's more like 34, a bit less, but yeah, 30 would get you through the door most of the time. Alex asking, does a military pension get taxed in the military always tax in the home country? So yes, it would be taxable in the UK. Although you need to declare that on the French tax return as well, but it won't be taxed in France. Yeah, can you elaborate on why getting a mortgage is so hard at the moment if you have a healthy deposit and a secure income? Sorry, I'm not a banker. I know it's hard. That's it. I don't know why. I know it's hard. You may be a multimillionaire, but then you pay cash. They just don't want to deal with. It's difficult for the French already, and if you're not French, they don't have a mortgage history for you or credit. There's no tax score here, so a credit score. So credit score rather, sorry. So no, it's just difficult. Yeah. Are there any exemptions for French visas for veterans from certain countries? Not veterans, but if you're a veteran, you may have a pension from the force and probably already qualify for a visitor visa. So, well, it should be straightforward, but that get in touch and I'll advise. What is the average charge to engage your help in getting visas? Well, it varies on, as I was saying, for these, I'll advise on what I think is the best way forward, and then I'll refer you to specialists. The cheapest we'd get is probably for a full relocation package, £2,000. Could even be from the US, by the way, because it's a French consul in the UK. And but just for a visa, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend just a visa. That would, sorry, £2,000 would be combined as a couple. Okay, that's a ballpark figure. That's a ballpark figure, and that would be for visa, healthcare application, and then residency permit. Okay, that's done. Other language proficiency. This one's difficult. Requirements for long-term visas or residency visas. Actually, no, none for visas. Residency, for most of you guys, probably not. It's only for spouse of a French citizen, parent of a French citizen. Hello, the bubble. Don't know why you're here, but I was feeling lonely. So, spouse of a French citizen, or partner of a French citizen, parent of a French citizen, and the family reunion residency permit. Apart from those permits, any other residency permit would be proficiency requirement exempt, language test exempt. Obviously, there is also a language test if you want to apply for citizenship, but these are the only situation. And for the ones who would be the spouse or partner of a French citizen, you can also like fail the test, and then you just get a 1-year permit, and then you can reapply the year after. Yeah. Okay, I haven't bought a house in France. I'm going to look for property. Not sure when I will have bought one. So when do I apply for a visa? Well, I'd say a visa boils down to 3 main pillars. Again, proof of address, proof of income, proof of medical coverage. Once you know how to secure those 3 things, and well, the income usually it's kind of a no-brainer. So it's more like address and medical insurance. Medical insurance, you just get in touch with us and you buy it. It's a walk in the park. So it leaves you with the proof of address. As long as this one is uncertain, you don't know what you'd be starting, it's probably not the good time for you to start the application. We can help you with that though. But what I'm saying is you need to know where you'd be going to start the process. So that's probably, well, that probably can answer the question in itself. Is Europe access insurance from Mondasure? I don't know about the competition. If you are a US citizen, how do we get a French long-term visa for a long stay? Sorry, if you are a US citizen, how do you get for a stay of less than 1 year? Oh, well, this is probably, well, depends. The 6-month visa or 6 to 12-month visa. If this is a 6-month visa is just a 6 month in a row. That's a bit of a problem. And then 6 to 12 months or 12 plus month. If you want to live in France permanently, you want a 12 plus month. Very important. And if you don't, like this case there, then it's the 6 to 12 month. So hopefully, and it starts on a website called francevisa.gov.fr. Well, just on the topic of insurance, beware. Unfortunately, even like some of the consulate subcontractor, mostly VFS, sometimes they tell you of some plans which might not be compliant. It really depends on what, well, they are in some situations, but you want a policy. If you move to France and will become a resident, you don't want travel insurance. That's the only thing I can tell you. You just want to get a policy that can cover you in France as a resident. Unfortunately, we've had a case even last month, someone who bought a policy, which basically was travel insurance. So sure was cheap, but she had a problem. She was 9 months in, and originally her claim was accepted, but then she found out, they figured out she actually was a resident, and eventually got the claim denied. So this could be a massive problem. So you don't want that. So hopefully it answers some of the questions, but you want a policy that can cover you as a resident, unless you're applying for a visa and don't intend to become a resident. But if you do, you want a policy, that's very, very important. That's a way for you to distinguish policies which will actually be good or okay for those who won't. Like if it's super cheap, ask only this question: would that be covered as a French resident, not as a French tourist? And then you'd see if the answer is yes, and make sure it's in writing, you know. How long between getting a long-term visa and activating the visa is there a limit? You need to activate the visa within 90 days. So you need to activate the visa within 90 days. It needs to be done. So I'd say as early as you can, you know. In the US, is the process for applying for a long stay visa enough to manage on our own, or is it best to get professional? Yeah, well, we can help, as I like to say, we can help you with pretty much anything, or you can do pretty much everything on your own, apart from insurance. So the only thing where I'd like to think we'll be working together probably would be insurance, but everything else, if it helps, I can tell you 70% of the insurance policies we're selling are people who do that on their own, like the visa or the residency application. So if it's of any, but otherwise, visas, we have people that can do the visa for less than €1,000, or even like the full relocation package for a couple thousand. So again, combined as a couple. I'm talking combined as a couple. So that's up to you. I'd say, well, obviously, I'm not the one paying, so it's easier for me to say that. But like, if you can afford it, well, it's definitely better to hire someone because it guarantees you'll get through the gates. And I've even seen people who've used the services of someone to get the visa, got the visa, and then needed to reapply for another visa the year after because they actually didn't stay all year long. And then when they reapplied, they did that on their own because, well, they've seen it done, so they knew how to do it, and was rejected when they did it themselves. So sure, I'm not playing the fear-mongering card because I've only seen this once, but just to say, if you want to play it safe and can afford it, it's best to seek advice. But a lot of people are doing that on their own as well. So then you get to decide. Okay. Okay. Let me. I'll jump to the bottom questions. Just to. I hear a wealth tax might be reimposed. Is this likely? I'm like you. I'm in the dark here. So hopefully not. If there is, again, the threshold was 1.3 million. So this is something that the left wanted in France. And by the way, I mean, people are saying the left. I mean, I'm not doing politics. I try to remain as neutral as possible. But like, people are saying that the left won the election. Not really. I mean, no one won. No one has a majority vote. So only the left wanted this reinstated, and they don't have majority. So this is indeed discussed and on the table, but no one has majority, and so yeah, that's as much as I can say. Do you need a work contract to get the blue card? Well, if you will be okay, there's no such. I mean, in France, it's not a French thing. So if you want a work visa, you need a work contract. Yes. If you want a passport talent, which is a multi-use visa, because you're either a C-level or a senior employee or high-skilled individuals, as they call it, then you do as well need a work contract. Hopefully it answers the question. If you're in your 50s and meet all the requirements, can you still get a 20 or 30 years mortgage in France? Well, yeah. Well, technically, you definitely can get a mortgage in your 50s in France. Then it's just a matter of getting the mortgage. So basically, I mean, the age won't be the problem. The fact that you're an expat might be, but the age won't be a problem. So, I'm a Brit and my fam's Moroccan. We wish to relocate to France from the UK with a long-term visa application. Yeah, sure. Obviously. Yeah, no problems with that. Is it true that US Social Security is not taxed in France? Yeah, it is. If we live in France but own a rental property in the UK, you'd pay rental taxes, taxes on that rental income in the UK still, because the property is in the UK. Should I sell my jewelry and silver in the US before moving to France due to taxation customs? No. If you're moving to France, intending to make France the permanent home, and you're moving all your assets all in one go, you'll have to declare that in customs, but they shouldn't be taxed. So, and then just a bit of a pro tip here: the moving company will take care of that, like almost all the time. Like custom declarations. So get in touch with them, and they'll tell you. We can even introduce you to a few. So no worries about that. If my partner buys a house in France in his name and I sell my UK house, which is in my name, we'll have to pay. Capital gains is about considering this property the main property. So if it's your main property, you don't pay capital gain. If it's the second home, you do pay capital gains. That's as easy as that. Okay, yeah, capital gains on selling my primary US home after. Well, again, if it's legally considered your main home, you don't pay capital gains. That's the best I can answer. If we are a retired couple, would we need to pay social charges? No. No. Again, depends on the sources of income. If you have dividend incomes, maybe. But that would be a flat rate. That wouldn't be the same rate. As a US citizen, passport holder, if I'm living in France on the initial 1-year residency permit, am I free to travel within the Schengen unrestricted? Again, first year is going to be a visa, unless you're in a different situation, but usually it's going to be a visa. With the visa, you're still bound by the 90 days rule in the Schengen zone, apart from France. It changes when you get to the stage where you get a residency permit. However, there are no borders in the Schengen area. So how would they know when you arrived? If you didn't fly, if you just drove. So, yeah. If we, okay. Can I show proof of income with funds in US accounts? Very good question. Very good question, Mary. Yes, you can actually show proof of income or savings in foreign currency. This is completely okay to do that. Okay. So, well, obviously, then you have to cope or consider the exchange rate, but that's completely okay. Okay. Did I hear you say you can make up to 23,000 euro on Luxembourg visa as a hobby? I was told that I can't make anything on that visa and should try a business visa. No. I said rental income. Okay. As long as you're making, let's say, a JIT business or an Airbnb and not exceeding the 23,000 euros threshold, it's still visitor visa compliant. If you're charging for your services, whatever you're doing, then this is a business, indeed, not a hobby. So as I was saying, the first euro you're making, you have to be registered as a business, which we call micro-entreprise in France, or some other form. But yeah, so just to clarify, was just on rental income, like JIT or Airbnbs. If you stay in France for 12 months with a long-term visa and change your mind about becoming a resident, would you be? No, yeah, no. You can change your mind. Yeah, France, you're not in jail. You're in France. It's a slight nuance. No, but you're good. You're good. Okay. I am retired from U.S. military and draw a monthly pension. Do I need to have a lump sum saved in order to apply? Not necessarily. Well, you can use that pension as long as it meets the requirements. Again, you don't need a lump sum. Yeah, no. If we retire to France, capital gains due in France on my New Zealand or UK. No, everything that deals with properties always will be taxable, tax liable in the country where the property sits. Can we take any disability benefit we have paid a UK tax for when we move to France? From the country of origin, yes. In France, not for the first 5 years. You may get some, for example, like a mobility card if you have a vehicle. That's possible fairly quickly. But disability benefits usually requires you to have been in France for a while. Will I pay 6.5% CSM tax on the net or gross on my passive income? So basically, that CSM tax, and I don't want to bother you to death, and then it's getting late, so we need to call this to an end. But you would be taxed on, well, you could be taxed again on the household income. So what's considered the taxable household income? So depending on the sources of income, could be net, could be gross. It really depends. If we're talking dividends, it's net. If we're talking your wage, it's probably gross. So, but again, in France, there's a difference between your gross wage and what they call the taxable wage, and then the net wage. So it's what they consider, and again, it's French specific, so that you can, well, if you do run some simulations online, you can see it, but there's no way I can know it in advance without the exact figures. It's on the taxable income, which could be the net, the gross, something in between. And then they'll consider the household income. They'll discount 23,000 per person, so 46,000 as a couple, and only the bit of income that sits on top of this would potentially be CSM taxable. Okay, for this if you think you could buy CSM, I strongly suggest getting in touch with a tax advisor, which again we can provide. No worries. Okay. I'm looking at the time here. I've vastly exceeded the usual duration. So I'll be going through the 3 last questions. If I didn't answer yours, I'll send a follow-up email. Feel free to reach out to me personally or to book a consultation one-on-one with me, and I'll be happy to address those. So, okay, here for the last 3, I'll pick them up randomly. Do people have to live together for a civil partnership? Not necessarily. And actually, vice versa. You can apply for visas and residency permit even without a civil partnership or being married. Okay, but you did need to make it official and go to the mairie or and actually, oh, by the way, pro tip: if you're married or have a civil partnership from any country abroad, the minute you arrive in France, make sure you also get it recognized in France, so that you're safe in case of, something happens, one of you passes away, or for inheritance purposes and things like that. So, or even if you split, So make sure you get that recognized in France, which involves a trip at the mairie. You love these guys. If you have a will in your home country, but no have assets in France like home, do you need a French will? Oh, yes. Well, you don't need it, but if you don't do anything, they'll apply the by default inheritance rules in France. And maybe that's okay with you, but maybe not. So I would strongly suggest that. Same, you can get in touch with me. We can share the details of a notaire, or you can just reach out to the notaire which you bought the property from. They can, because in France, these are the same guys who are selling you, dealing with the property transactions, also deals with the will and the wills. So yeah, that was for Charles. And final question. Okay, see who wins the lottery. Um, uh, can you speak about sole entrepreneurship? What falls under it, and who could help me set it up in France? Obviously, me. No, not kidding. So, sole entrepreneurship, this is actually exactly the same as a couple and stuff. Like you could just create a business, apply for some sort of a business visa, might be an entrepreneur visa. There are very, very different kinds of business visa. The profession libérale kind of visa, where it's usually a micro entreprise, or like you register or form a proper business and you invest 30,000 into the business, kind of what they call the entrepreneur visa. But then you require something more like an LLC or an LTD in France, which we call an SARL, or could be an SAS. Well, I don't want to bombard you with all these terms. Basically, I can advise, and then later could even refer you to accountants and specialists who can get the job done. So thank you guys for staying with me. Hopefully I've not bored you to death. No, I think you do deserve the apero time, a good bottle of wine, or even champagne if you're on the fancy side. Thank you for staying and coming. I mean, I'm really thrilled by all the support you're showing. Thank you very much. Again, if I didn't answer all your questions, we'll reach out after this event. You'll be provided with an opportunity to ask your questions in person and schedule an in-person appointment with me, should you so desire. Well, we'll call it a wrap for tonight, or this morning again. Hopefully tonight, because if it's tonight where you live, you have for that cup of wine now. So we'll share virtually this cup of wine in a bit, and hope to see you soon in one of the next events. Feel free to reach out. Have a great evening, guys. Take care. Thanks a lot.